Welcome to Canadian Justice. I'm Christine Van Gyn, and today we're discussing the current chaos at airports across Canada, the political and legal causes of that chaos, and what can and should be done to resolve the situation. Hundreds of canceled flights, staff shortages, and hours-long lines are disrupting travelers across Canadian airports. These delays are being driven by multiple causes, but chief among them are pandemic-related rules like proof of vaccination policies, random testing, and vaccine mandates for federal employees. Border restrictions have been extended until the end of June, and faced with chaos at airports where travel volumes have returned to 70%, the industry is now calling for these restrictions to end. One prominent voice who's been leading the charge to end some of these mandates is Member of Parliament for Thornhill, Melissa Lantsman. Melissa's joining us today to talk about the causes of the chaos at airports and what can be done about it. Melissa, thank you so much for joining us today. So, what can you tell us about the current situation at airports in Canada? Can you paint a picture for us of what it looks like right now?
Well, I think you described it pretty well, and thanks for having me on. It's delays, it's long lines at both customs and through security. It's canceled flights. We've seen carriers cancel up to 10% of flights in a week. Now that's significant at a place like Pearson, which is our biggest airport. It's in our economic center here in Canada, and it's a picture of a place that's pretty chaotic and one that you wouldn't want to go to.
So can you relay some of the stories that you've heard from travelers who have reached out to you with their concerns?
Yeah, well, I've now become a sounding board for, I think, frustrated travelers, which is a good thing because I think they feel like finally somebody's listening. But we started asking these questions of the government in March, and it's June, and everybody knew this was coming. There was pent up demand. And so now I'm getting stories of I wait on the tarmac. I've got little kids with me. We're waiting through 6 hours of customs. We've had our flights canceled. It's sort of anything and everything. It's every single experience that you wouldn't want to have as a traveler in this country or as somebody who's coming here to either do business or enjoy some of the fruits of what Canada has. Particularly leading up to our biggest travel season.
So, I've heard from varied experiences across Canada. So, are there some airports where this isn't an issue, or are there some where it's worse? And why is it happening at some airports and not at others?
So I think this is a bit of a hangover from COVID. So during at the height of the pandemic, the government actually stopped international international flights from landing at all but 4 airports. So that was Calgary, Vancouver, Montreal, and Toronto. So a lot of these airlines have sort of rerouted and are sort of living in those plans. I think they are worse at our bigger airports. I know that we hear the government saying that that this is bad everywhere in the world, and there are some problems when lots of people come back to air travel. But the aim, we don't want to be amongst the lowest. And I think in this case we are the lowest performer, and we are an outlier, and that's a problem for the Canadian economy. It's a problem for tourism. It's a problem for people who want to just get where they're going.
Yeah, with respect to the problem for our economy, what exactly, is there any information about what type of impact this chaos or the travel restrictions in general have had on the broader economy? Is there any data about that?
So there's data that becomes available all the time on sort of the number of people coming through our airports. But you got to remember, this is the center of our economy here in Canada. Toronto is it's the banking center, it's the media center, it's all of those things. There's a lot of people that come through Pearson to do business. There's a lot of people that come through Pearson on a regular basis that connect to other parts of our country. And we've heard from the airlines, the carriers themselves. We've heard from the Airports Council. We've heard from chambers of commerce. We've heard from health experts. We've now even heard of Liberal members of their own party that it's time to stop these legacy health restrictions, because at some point, that was the pinpointed problem. And if you're going to try to fix this problem, which I think has become much bigger than just restrictions, I think we can do the very easy thing of getting in line with the rest of the world and dropping some of these legacy health restrictions, as these groups have called for now months.
We've got to go to commercial break, but when we come back, I want to talk about what some of those different restrictions are and whether there's really any rationale for keeping them in place. We're going to go to break, but when we come back, we'll dig into that.
Sounds good.
Welcome back to Canadian Justice, where I'm discussing the current chaos at Canadian airports with MP Melissa Lantsman. Melissa, I wanted to dig into the causes of some of these delays and disruptions. Can you describe what some of those causes are, in particular as it relates to the COVID measures that are still in place in Canada?
For sure, and I'll start by saying we are an outlier, particularly on this one measure, and we've still got domestic travel mandates. So if for whatever reason you chose not to get vaccinated, you actually can't get on an airplane, you can't get on a train, you can't get on a federally regulated piece of infrastructure. Although there are some weird anomalies in that when it comes to ferries, but we are the only
just on that. Like I was looking at the document yesterday that shows the exemptions. I think federal inmates being transferred are not required to be vaccinated necessarily in order to board an airplane, which I think might be upsetting for some.
Yeah, I find it completely offensive. We've got people that have, they've missed weddings and they've missed funerals and they haven't seen their families. We treat travel, I think, as a luxury for a lot of us, particularly those who live in Toronto like I do. But for a lot of people, this is a necessity, and we sort of forget that in a country as vast as ours. So we still got mandates. We still got mandates on federally regulated employees. So that's the entire public service, which includes CASA, which you probably now has become part of your lexicon. Those are the security people at the airport for CBSA. So we've got a whole bunch of people that could come back to work, presumably if they're still wanting to do this, that could come back to work. So we're missing people there. We still have about 4,000 tests a day happening at Pearson. That's the random test. There's a little bit of arts and crafts going on at the airport, where you come and you get a sticker and it's either red or green and then you're shifted into these lines. But that all takes manpower and people. And so there are people that are randomly testing still within the airport. And I'll have to say that it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me why we're doing it, because you get a test in the airport, but you're not quarantining, you're going home and you don't know if you have COVID. So I'm not sure exactly what they're doing this, but I think the key here is that we have continued to ask the government for specific health advice that they are getting to justify these measures. And I've asked probably about 30 times in a public forum, and we haven't gotten a single shred of evidence, not from the cabinet minister, not from the prime minister, not from any members who often do their bidding on nightly panels. We haven't gotten a single piece of evidence from any health expert that says these measures are actually keeping us safe, and that's the problem.
So one of the things that stood out to me is obviously the federal minister of transport has been asked about these delays, and one of the causes that he named was rusty travelers, people who forget to remove their laptop from their bag or forget that they're not supposed to bring water, to put their toiletries in a clear bag. So he's given that as an explanation. How accurate is that as a contributing factor to these delays?
So here's the rule as a politician. When you've abdicated your responsibility to make sure that our airports are working, you probably shouldn't blame the constituent, the voter, the traveler for I think, your incompetence. And I think that's exactly what we saw. And we saw it sort of across the board, where we had the parliamentary secretary, the person that sort of does the minister's bidding in Parliament when he doesn't want to, or when he can't, I should say. And they were blaming the industry for these delays. These are problems at security. They're problems at CBSA. They're problems that the legacy health restrictions are causing, and they're certainly not the traveler. I have to say, the Pearson problem is not Pearson. It is not the workers there. It is not the staff people. It is not air traffic control. It's not the baggage handlers. It is the federal government who needs to make this place work, that has abdicated their responsibility to do so.
So I've noticed a shift from industry, who for a long time, supported a lot of the measures that were in place. A lot of Canadians supported it. But recently we've seen sort of a shift from industry saying that they too want to see things sort of go back to normal. So what can you tell us about what industry in the airline industry, airports, the travel industry in general is saying about ending these restrictions? We've got about a minute.
Yeah, look, I think they've seen the writing on the wall for the rest of the world, and they've seen the rest of the world and provinces and places within our own within our own daily lives. You can go to a baseball game, you can go to the playoffs in a hockey game if you're lucky to live in a city where they're actually in the playoffs. And you don't need to be vaccinated. So this is sort of the last bastion of grasping to, I think, what is ideological, what is a bit vindictive, what is punishing to domestic travelers, and they've finally had enough.
Right.
This industry has been attacked, so I think they're I think they're finally speaking up.
We've got to go to commercial break, but we will continue this conversation after. Welcome back to Canadian Justice, where we're discussing chaos at Canadian airports and the legal and practical causes of that chaos with MP Melissa Lantsman. So, Melissa, you brought a motion in Parliament to try to end the travel restrictions that are currently in place still and return things to, kind of 2019 normal travel levels. So what can you tell us about the motion and what happened?
So we called for the complete drop in restrictions. So I got to present this motion in Parliament. What happens is we get to debate it for a day, and every single member of the House that wasn't part of my party voted against us. And now we're seeing, members of the NDP and members of the Liberal Party all say, well, it's time to relook at these mandates and relook at these restrictions. So we're only a week later. So I'm fairly certain that it's my motion. But I've got to say, they are not hurting me, and they are not hurting Canadians.
So, Melissa, you don't think that the science has changed in the week?
Well, if the science has changed, I would have liked to see the science that it was originally predicated on, and I'd like to see why the science in this country is different than all of the other countries. If you've traveled abroad, what we are doing here is a bit it's theatrics. It's a bit ridiculous. You're walking around Heathrow, you get on a plane, you board an Air Canada flight to go back, and you all of a sudden have to put your mask on. You might not even have one because you haven't been wearing one in 2 weeks. While in London, you certainly weren't wearing one at Heathrow. So this is a motion that I think they voted against because Conservatives have been calling on this for months now. But they are not hurting Conservatives. They're hurting Canadians. They're hurting the economy. They're hurting the tourism sector. And I think that there's a bit of a wake-up call going on in each of those parties where members of those own parties are it's incumbent on them to speak up and just fix it. If there's such an easy fix here, I don't quite understand why we're not seeing the minister out right now saying we're going to drop this.
So, speaking of other countries, it was just recently announced that the American government is going to end the test requirement to enter the United States. Can you talk about that and if you think that could have an impact on, maybe perhaps improving the situation at airports?
Look, I think that it pushes the government into, it boxes them in, I think, to follow suit. But what this really does, and what's really concerning, is that it now makes the U.S. a more attractive destination for travel. We haven't hit our peak yet. We're still about 20 to 30% under peak travel. So if this is happening now, you've got to ask yourself, if we were at our full complement, plus add in all of those people that aren't unvaccinated, which maybe 4 or 5 million people, depending on sort of what you're reading. This is, that's a lot of pressure on Canadian airports. We now have viral videos from ex-NHL players telling people to stay away from Pearson, and we've now made international news, and that's a problem. We don't have bad airports. We have a problem right now that could be solved, and I think we ought to solve it faster, so people aren't going to upstate New York rather than cottage country outside of Toronto, because that's what they will do.
One of the things that I have seen the government say is that they expect that these delays and kind of chaotic scene at the airport will continue until August. Is there any reason why they're saying August? Obviously, we know travel increases over the summer when kids are out of school. So is there something that the government has planned that they think is going to improve the situation? If it's not ending these mandates, what is it?
Well, it's a really good question. Like, we've called for the end of these mandates. We know that they've added a complement of staff to our security, what's called CATSA, in this country. But that's just a fraction of what we need. So I don't know if they have big plans for August. I don't know if they're buying time for with the notion of August, but it's this is critical for our tourism sector, for investment that's coming into this country, to get this fixed immediately. Otherwise, we go another summer where we have, we're way past the height of the pandemic, but we still seem to be living in it. And I just think Canadians deserve better.
So we've got about a minute left, but there's the last round of restrictions was extended until the end of June. So what does that include? And could the government just not renew them? Is that a potential path out of this?
I had the same question. I said, what happens on July 1st, other than of course Canada Day? But maybe the science changes on July 30th, where we're going to have this mountain of data that they're all going to show us and say, you know what, we don't need these anymore. But they can do this right now, and they absolutely know it. And I hope that I hope that they see that this is not hurting conservatives. I hope that they see that this is hurting Canadians. Yeah. It's not hurting the unvaccinated. It's right. Not, in any other way. It's hurting every single
Melissa,
Canadian.
we've got to go to commercial break, but we'll continue this right after. Welcome back to Canadian Justice, where we're chatting with MP Melissa Lantsman about the current chaos at Canadian airports. Melissa, obviously I'm a lawyer focused on constitutional issues. I want to ask your perspective. Is there a constitutional problem here with some of these travel restrictions? We obviously have a charter guaranteed right to mobility, to enter, remain in, and leave Canada, to take up residence in different provinces. That's protected by Section 6. Is that right engaged by any of these restrictions?
Yeah, look, I am not a lawyer, but I do see what's happening right in front of me. I do hear from constituents and now from all Canadians saying that their mobility rights have been restricted. And I do see what's happening in other countries and where that's not happening. I think it might be happening in North Korea, but I'm not sure that that's the bar that we should set for ourselves in terms of mobility rights. I do see that this is hurting the economy. I do see that this is tearing families apart. And I do see that this is driving people out of this country. So as a politician and not a lawyer, I got to be really concerned about this. And I got to be concerned and ask the right questions of the government, who has not provided a good reason why they are not letting people on airplanes, on trains, and on federally regulated sort of pieces of infrastructure that get them from A to B.
I want to clear up something that I do hear a lot of. The question basically is, can you leave Canada if you are not vaccinated?
Well, it's a good question. It's going to be based on a carrier. You can leave, and you can leave by car. The question is you can always come back as a citizen, but there's a whole bunch of rules that get engaged. You've got to have a quarantine plan, believe it or not, for 14 days, even though we've done away with the 14-day requirement a long time ago, and you've got to test when you come in. So they're always going to protect your right to come in as a Canadian citizen, so to come back. But you can leave, and you can leave by car, and you can leave by foot. But we don't want you doing that, and we want you to come back. Unless it's for a vacation, then go nuts.
What about exemptions from this vaccine requirement for domestic planes and I guess international planes as well? Are there exemptions for people who, for example, can't be vaccinated for a medical reason, or who have declined vaccination for if they believe in faith healing, for example? Are there exemptions for those people?
So presumably there are on paper. And I've just never seen one. And you can imagine that, sort of being a vocal opponent of this policy from the government, we get a lot of people calling our office, and we've never been successful with the government or any single carrier to get a single medical exemption for somebody to get on a plane. So yes, they do exist in theory, but they do not exist in practice. And I would love to be proven wrong on that. And furthermore, I'd love to know how they got the exemption, because we've been trying.
Wow. That's a lot. I mean, I've worked on the issue of medical exemptions for people who can't be vaccinated in British Columbia, people who have had adverse reactions and things like that. And certainly the British Columbia government has treated them in an incredibly heavy-handed way and not been very accommodating of these individuals at all, which is why we brought the challenge in court there. So it's really troubling to hear that you're having the same experience with the federal government. So, last question. We've got a minute left, and I'm asking this question a little bit selfishly since I have travel plans in the next month for summer vacation. What's your advice for someone who needs to travel soon if they don't want to have a terrible experience at the airport?
Yeah, look, we're going to continue to push on this. I'm the last one to give you travel advice, but it says to go 3 hours early and just expect the delays if somebody in the federal government doesn't do something about this. So we're going to continue pushing before your vacation, before everybody's vacation, to make sure that we don't have to have this conversation.
Well, I certainly hope that it is resolved for all the travel I have coming up, and which I imagine you have as well as a busy member of Parliament for Thornhill. Melissa, thank you so much for coming on today. It's been a really interesting conversation. I hope that you're successful. I'm obviously invested in this. I don't like waiting in lines. I don't think any of our viewers enjoy waiting in lines at airports either. So I appreciate your hard work pushing for this.
We gotcha. Thanks.
Thank you. Bye-bye. We've heard today about the chaos at Canadian airports and how government rules and regulations are making the situation worse. Much of Canada's economy is facing disruption right now, but our politicians should ensure that the laws and regulations they enact make the situation better, not worse. It's time to end the COVID restrictions for flights and return to the 2019 way of flying. At least that's my opinion. You be the judge. Thanks for watching, and remember, a freer Canada starts with you.